I will not go into too much details in the life of Jacob Sasportas or in his achievements, but I really focus this talk on his family, on a genealogical perspective. And the key word in my presentation is really documented, because I call my presentation Rabbi Jacob Sasportas a documented genealogy, and I will try to emphasize as much as possible how I use the sources. And this is really how I want to do my research in genealogy, and really go quite deep in the material to extract the relevant information. So, as Stone said, Rabbi Jacob Sasportas is a famous rabbi of the 17th century. Here are some alleged representation of him. There are some that are very well known, some that are less known, almost not known. There are controversies about, is it really him depicted here? There have been articles in serious reviews discussing the relevance of these representations, but this is just for an introduction. It's not really important for what follows, but I thought it was nice to put a face on the people, the person I will discuss today. So let's start. Jacob Sasportas, he is very prominent people of the 17th century. Many people have discussed his achievements and his life. Started from the early time when he was even alive. So this is Daniel Levi de Barrios, there's David Franco Mendes, Heinrich Kreitz later on, Da Silva Rosa, Edward Lorenz, and the famous book by Gershom Scholem about Shabtai Tzvi, who discusses a lot, Rabbi Jacob Sasportas and his opposition to the movement, and later works by Eliyahu Moyal, Isaac Sasportas, and very recently a very good biography, extended biography, I should say, because it discussed many things, not only his life, but many things about Jacob Sasportas by Professor Jacob Dweck. But again, I'm stressing that what I will discuss today is mainly genealogical. And for reference, this is my legends in a way. I have these two buttons here that will appear basically everywhere in the presentation. The purple ones are clickable, and I have online sources, and the gray ones are offline material that I have observed, acquired elsewhere. First things first, let's start by the life of Jacob Sasportas with a very brief summary, and this will also be used in my presentation as the outline, so in that way it's relevant. So he was born in Oran, lived at his early life, had a professional move to Tlemcen, where he started officing as a rabbi and a judge. Later moved to Amsterdam for obscure reasons, but we will discuss what happened there. He was alone there. Came back to Africa and moved from Amsterdam to Salé. Then later get back to Amsterdam with his new family. From there, he almost immediately went to London to act as the chief rabbi of the newly founded community. And from London, he escaped when the plague arose to Hamburg, where most of his work against Shabtai Tzvi took place. So basically, this is where his work as a rabbi, as a judge, and as an opponent to Shabtai Tzvi got very famous. At the end of his life, he went back to Amsterdam, shortly to Livorno, and back to Amsterdam, where eventually he became the chief rabbi. We have some material about him, his wills that contain a lot of genealogical material, and eulogies by Isaac Sasportas and Daniel Levi de Barrios that also discuss a bit of his life and details. Let's start by the beginning. So the beginnings are in Oran, in nowadays Algeria. There's a controversy about his birth. I mean, basically, it ranges from 16 and 10 to 16 and 18. I can get back to this at the end if you're interested, but I thought that was not really relevant to discuss the precise date. But what's interesting is to discuss his family, his close family there. So basically, his parents and siblings, and what we have from his own works. So he has a work that's called Toldot Yaakov, and who was issued in 1652. And there he signs the introduction by Jacob Sasportas, Ben Kvod Avi Adoni Aaron Sasportas, so which means he is Jacob Sasportas, the son of Aaron Sasportas, alive at that time and living in Oran. About the death of his father, we have a responsum in another book by Jacob Sasportas, which is called Oel Yaakov, and the book of responsa. And there he states that at some point he discussed the students of Aaron, his father and master, uh, and uh, and from the I mean in Hebrew it states Talmidav shel Aaron Aviadoni Mori Zal Alav Shalom. That means of blessed memory, which means he's dead at that time. So basically, his father. We know that he's called Aaron. We know that he was already still alive in 1652 and already dead in 1667. We don't know anything about his mother, but we know something about one of his brothers. And we know that he had a brother that was called Moshe. And we know this because they married two sisters. We'll see that later. And this is from Daniel Levi de Barrios, who states that Jacob Sasportas was the son of Oran and from of the family Sasportas, and he was a brother of Moshe. So we already know his father and his brother. Another thing that we know from Jacob Sasportas is his own claim to be a descendant of Nachmanides, because in one of his, I mean, okay, in one of his responsa in Oel Yaakov again, he states, Adoni Zekni Ramban Zal Asher Anilo Yud Aleph Dor, which literally means that he claims to be the 11th generation since the Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, which is the Nachmanides. And this is propagated basically everywhere. It's ubiquitous in all the literature about Jacob Sasportas, but there's an obvious mistake here. I mean, something, at least something very questionable, because Nachmanides was born, I mean, he lived in the 13th century. Jacob Sasportas lived in the 17th century. So basically, there would be 11 generations spanning 420 years, which would make almost 40 years per generation, which, I mean, this doesn't work. I mean, we are genealogists, and we know that that's not faithful. 38 is a lot for a generation, and it cannot go on for 11 generations like this. So I thought, okay, there's an accounting mistake here somewhere, or there's something strange going around. So let's look at the original manuscript, which I was able to access at Yeshiva University because it's digitized. And here's the exact same sentence. Adoni Zekni Aramban Zal Asher Ani Lo, and this is the number Dor, which means again I am a descendant in some generations of the Ramban, but the sum here, the question is how many generations do we read? And I try to compare this number here with the author's own numbering elsewhere in his manuscript. And this is really easy because we have a numbering of the responsa themselves. So we have Yud Aleph, which means 11. we have Yud Zayin, which means 17, and we have Yud Tet, which means 19, which are the most relevant one, and I mean the most close to be compared with this figure here. And here, so the editor read Yud Aleph, which is this here that we can actually relate, and he read 11 here. But I don't read 11. I read either Yud Zayin, which is, oops, sorry, this one here, or possibly Yud Aleph Vav. In both cases, this means 17 generations. So it's either 10 plus 7 or 10 plus 6 plus 1. In both cases, it's 17 generations, and that would make a reasonable 25 years per generation. So I claim that there's a mistake from the editor, from the printer actually, from the printer of the first edition of Oel Yaakov, who read 11 generations, whereas I read 17 generations. That makes most sense I mean, when we do the math. Of course, we need to take this with caution. I have a full discussion at the end. There are other sources that claim that it's 11 generation, but I don't know if these are independent sources or if those sources also rely on the same edition that we do. But at least my stance today is that, okay, there may be a mistake here, and the long-believed claim that Rabbi Jacob Sasportas is in 11 generations since the Ramban is actually 17 generations. So let's try to fill that gap, and let's try to see how can we go from the Ramban to from Nachmanides to Jacob Sasportas. So walk down the 17 generations of the genealogy. We will start not at the Ramban himself, but somewhere in the 14th century Mallorca, where we have early mentions of Sasportas, and actually one leading figure, which is Abraham Sasportas in Palma de Mallorca, who was the leader of the community. So we say the Nagid. He was the leader of the community and a secretary of the community. He was involved in fiscal matters with the king there. And it's really important because that's exactly the time when the community of Palma de Mallorca was exiled. I mean, it's 1 century before the Alhambra decree of 1492, but there was already an expulsion from the Jews in Spain, and namely in the Balearic Islands in 1391. And our guy, Abraham Sasportas, was the leader of the community exactly at that time. And we can trace in different piece of material that I found in books, in articles, and that Abraham Sasportas was the Nagid, so the leader of the community, and that at some point he really briefly converted, became Antonius Sasportas, just to manage the goods of the people there. So while all the people were exiled, he stayed just to manage the the business of the community and the relationship to the king. And when that was done, he moved and he went to Algeria, precisely to the kingdom of Tlemcen, where we find him again. First in Honein, which is the port, which is the harbor on the shore close to Tlemcen, and then in Tlemcen itself. And there, the sources are scarce, but we find him in the responsa. So in Middle Ages, or 14th century, 14th, 15th century Barbaria, the sources that we have are the rabbinic correspondences, and we have three main rabbis that were leading the community in the whole of Algeria and more generally in the whole of Barbaria at that time, which were the Ribash, Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Sheshet, which was the gaon of that time, so the most important figure, rabbinic figure of that time. There's the Rashbat, Rabbi Shimon ben Tzemach Duran, and the Rashbash, Shlomo ben Shimon, son of the former. So it's three generations of rabbis that who acted as main rabbinic figures in Algeria at the time, and a bit later. And what's interesting that we find traces of Abraham Sasportas as the leader of the community in Tlemcen in those responsa. And even more, we have actually one question by Abraham Sasportas to the most important figure of the time, the Ribash, which is in a responsum here. He asked himself a question to the illustrious Ribash. If we move straight to the end, we can have a stance about the death of Abraham Sasportas because one of the responsa of the Rashbash, which is a bit later, mentioned a judgment in the court of in Tlemcen where it's decided what to do with the estate of Abraham Sasportas and how it should be split and I mean successorial decisions among his orphans. So from this we know that he had at least two children because it's orphans in the plural. Actually, I can show you this. So it's a decision of Rabbi Shlomo ben Shimon Duran, who decides about the question made by the orphans of the leader Abraham Sasportas. So this is the first Sasportas entering Algeria, the first exile from Sfarad to the shores of North Africa. Then there is his son, and his son is famous for being a rabbi himself and a judge in the whole of the kingdom of Tlemcen. And we have a book that was made by Noach Aminoach, who is a collection of all his responsa, with I mean all his correspondence with all rabbis of that time. And from these we can extract the most interesting one in terms of genealogy. And we find at least two letters that he exchanged with the Rashbash. One in which he says that Rabbi Yosef Yalda Bito Bat Umeta Besof Shloshim Yom, which means to Rabbi Yosef Sasportas, a girl was born to his daughter, and who died within 30 days. So it's a juridical question, but what's interesting us here is that it mentions that Rabbi Joseph Sasportas had a daughter, and this daughter had a daughter who died early. Another responsum with Rabbi Shlomo ben Shimon Duran, where he states that Rav Shlomo ben Arav Yonah des Mestri, Zal, She'ata Nosa Bito, which means you married the daughter of Rabbi Yonah des Mestri, Rabbi Shlomo ben Yonah des Mestri. So we know that Rabbi Yosef Sasportas married the daughter of a famous rabbi. I will come to this in a minute. And in another manuscript that was found by Noach Aminoach and who's with the responsum of Rabbi Yosef Sasportas, we find other information of a genealogical nature. That first he had a grandson that was called Moshe, and that he had a son that was called Yehuda. So basically, in all of this material, we learn that he's the son of Abraham Sasportas. He had a son that was called Yehuda. He had a grandson that was called Moshe. He had a daughter, and he married the daughter of Shlomo des Mestri, an important rabbi. From this, I can build this tree. So our Yosef Sasportas is here. He's the son of Abraham Sasportas, who was the leader of the community in Mallorca and later on in Tlemcen. We know that this Abraham had children in the plural, so at least Yosef and at least one other. And we know that Yosef had a son Yehuda, a grandson Moshe, a daughter, and that he married the daughter of Shlomo, this mystery. And this is important because actually we know from other sources, other precise sources, that from this branch actually he relates to the Maimonides, to Nachmanides, sorry. Actually, the wife of Yosef Sasportas was the granddaughter of the grandson of Nachmanides. Actually, he was also the grandson of Rabbeinu Yonah, which is another Gaon of that time, another really dominant rabbi of, of Girona of the 30th century. So we have an idea now of where the descendants from where Jacob Sasportas could have been related to the Ramban. Actually, it's through not the Sasportas line, but through the wife of Rabbi Joseph Sasportas, who was a straight descendant of Nachmanides. Talking about the son of Rabbi Yosef, so Rabbi Yehuda Sasportas, he was also a rabbi in the kingdom of Tlemcen. He also corresponded with other rabbis of that time, and we find one of the responsa of Tzemach ben Shlomo Duran, another generation of Duran's rabbi, where he's mentioned, so basically there. And also we have his tomb. So Rabbi Yehuda Sasportas is the first Sasportas in Africa whose tomb we know of. And it's in Tlemcen, and it dates back to 1492. After that, I don't have a direct genealogy to Jacob Sasportas, but have clues. In Tlemcen, from Tlemcen, the Sasportas moved gradually to Oran when Oran became Spanish. And we know a lot of this by a book by Jean-Frédéric Schaub, Les Juifs du Roi d'Espagne, which means the Jews of the King of Spain, because it's a less known story that there were Jews in Spain long after the 1492 decree, and namely in Oran, who was under Spanish rule, and where the Jews remained there and actually had an important position there. And there were two important families, the Cancino and the Sasportas there, and we have a lot of details about the Sasportas family in that book and in the corresponding archives. I've put here a snapshot of what I found in the book. Of course, there's no direct link to Jacob Sasportas, but somehow he belongs to that family. Another important book that I've found on the internet, actually in an auction, is this book here that, we have figures, it's a huge manuscript by Rabbi Isaac Sasportas, who is a rabbi of the exact same period of Rabbi Jacob Sasportas, who was officing in Oran and Tlemcen. So he's definitely related to Jacob Sasportas. I haven't been able to figure exactly how. I have some clues, but I don't want to discuss them because it's not proved. But I put a lot of hope in the transcription, digitization of this book, who was sold, I don't know to whom, but I hope in the next decade somehow it will be put to light, and we can access to that huge amount of material here. This place haven't filled the gap between Jacob Sasportas and the early Sasportas in Algeria, so I have many generations to fill, but this is basically how I feel the family moved so from Mallorca to Tlemcen, from Tlemcen to Oran, and from Oran we know that Jacob Sasportas was born there, and we can now discuss his early life. So he started really being important as a judge in Tlemcen in the 1630s. So he moved from Oran to Tlemcen and started having a life there. And when I say a life, which this means in terms of genealogical terms, a wife and children. So it's now established that Jacob had children prior to his exile from Tlemcen, but nothing is known with certainty regarding his first wife. We can make an assumption at least is that he must have had a firstborn son, and this firstborn son must have been named by his paternal grandfather, Aaron. So we have some intuition that somehow in that place in Tlemcen, around that time in Jacob Sasportas' first life, there was a son that was called Aaron. But what we know with certainty is that there was a son that was called Samuel, because Samuel survived and went with Jacob Sasportas to um, to London. I see that I have to hurry a lot, so let's go on. Samuel Sasportas is the first known son of Jacob Sasportas, and we now know that he was born of his first wife, not of his second wife that we will discuss later. He had a will in London, but his will mentions neither his mother nor his wife nor children. So basically, we don't. I mean, there's no mention of wife. There's no mention of children for Samuel Sasportas, the first known son of Jacob Sasportas. But there is a mention of sisters. Sorry. We have two versions of the will. One in English, one in Spanish, and both say the same thing. I leave for a legacy to every one of my sisters in Tlemcen 500 florins, enjoining to send them by the way of Algiers or by some other safe way. So this is a clue that Samuel Sasportas has sisters in Tlemcen late in life, so which means basically in 16 when he did his will in 1692. At the end of the life of Jacob Sasportas, there were still daughters of Jacob Sasportas living in Tlemcen. But then Jacob Sasportas moved to Amsterdam, and he was there alone. And what happened? He went there to rescue his family that was held captive in Tlemcen. And he went to Amsterdam and asked for funds to the Mahamad, to the community there, to release his family from the king of Tlemcen. And we have a first mention of this in March 1653, where he asked for money for his wife and his sons, in plural. And later in June that year, he asked again for money for his wife and his son, in a singular this time. And again in November, it's discussed that the community paid some money, sent money to Livorno to redeem his wife and his son. So from this we have conjectures about what happened. There can be two ways of understanding. Between March and June, maybe one of the sons died, and the other one was released later after November 1653. This would be Aaron died and Samuel redeemed. Or maybe one was redeemed between March and June, and the other was never redeemed. Of course, there may be other possibilities, but these are the two conjectures that I see for what happened between March and November 1653. And actually, that is consistent with what we know later, that Jacob Sasportas never mentioned this family again, his first family that stayed in Tlemcen, except for Samuel, who came with him in London. So then there is his second wife, so a full new life that started in Salé. So basically, Jacob Sasportas goes to Salé after Amsterdam, I guess that's for to greet his son that was released from Tlemcen. This is my bet, but this needs to be proven. And anyways, there he starts a new life. He starts a new life as a rabbi, and he starts a new life with his family. So he has a new wife and new other children. Jacob's wife was long believed to be Rachel the Daniel Toledano. And this is almost everywhere when you talk about the genealogy of Jacob Sasportas, even in Amsterdam sources, in community sources, in later sources, we find that Jacob Sasportas was married to Rachel Toledano. And Tontilen here actually showed that this was wrong, and this is how this originated in a mistake made by Da Silva Rosa in a biography and propagated since then. Tell me if I'm wrong, Ton. You're most welcome to intervene. Instead, Daniel de Barrios has it right, and in one of his books, and talking about Jacob Sasportas, he says that actually there were four daughters of an Azule guy, one of whose married Jacob Sasportas, and actually it means that Rachel Azule married Jacob Sasportas, and it was not Rachel Toledan. What's most interesting is that Daniel Lévy de Barrios is contemporaneous of Jacob Sasportas, so he's quite trustful. But most importantly, it's corroborated by notarial archives, and we have deeds, we have wills that prove that actually Jacob Sasportas' wife was Rachel Azulay and not Rachel Toledano. So this is a big thing. Thanks, Don. Uh, it doesn't have much consequences, but it actually changed the picture that we know. I mean, he was not related to the Sasportas by marriage, to the Toledano by marriage, but to the Azule. But still, the Toledanos are in the game, as we'll see later. So with his second wife, he had a son, Isaac. Isaac was a rabbi in Amsterdam. He was also a diplomatic agent because he accompanied his uncle, Joseph Toledano, as an ambassador of the Salés king to the Staten General of the Dutch Republic, and is indeed mentioned in some diplomatic letters by Dutch consul Jan Smit-Slependorf. In terms of genealogy, what's interesting is that he wrote the eulogy of his father, and in this eulogy, many interesting things can be read. So I mean, it's here. It's actually in his book of Responsa, but we find inside this book a passage discussing his family, and the family passage that I've translated here is that also the passing away of my brother Moshe I will not bear, that in the first year of his wedding, death has brought down his stature on his long way to the Holy Land. Which means we know from this that he had a brother Moshe, so that Jacob Sasportas has a son Moshe, and that this son got married, died the same year of his marriage, and that he moved to the Holy Land. There's an inconsistency with the dates. I will not talk about this, but what's interesting is that he's talking about his brother Moshe. He's also talking about his deceased brother Samuel and Aaron, by the way. And he's talking about his deceased sister, Sarah, and of her orphans. Sorrow even doubled when I saw orphans of my sister Sarah, whose death took the joy from my eyes and left me in anguish and bitterness. So this text is dated 1698, but there's a problem here because we know that Sarah was still alive later on. But okay, that's not very important. What's interesting also is that we have neither mention of a wife nor child in the wills of Isaac Sasportas, although he was a rabbi, so that's quite surprising for a rabbi. We have no mention of any close family to him. While in Saleh, Jacob and Rachel Sasportas had a daughter, Sarah, who married Eliada Costa Mesquita in Livorno in 1680. This we know from the book of Alan Nijar and friends, looking at the Ketubot of Livorno. And we know from wills that this Sarah had a son, Abraham, and a granddaughter, Sarah. They were in London in 1713. The wills also mention that there were other children in Tunis by 1730, and that Sarah died somewhere between 1708 and 1730 in Tunis. After Saleh and Amsterdam as a poor rabbi, Jacob Sasportas moves to London, and this is the first major professional move of Jacob Sasportas because he becomes the head of the Jewish community there, the chief rabbi, the Haham Shalem of the London community. And there he has a son. So he stayed basically 1 year in London between 1664 and 1665 when the plague arose and he had to move again, but he still had time to have a son there, Abraham. Abraham, who was born in London, as we know from his wedding notice in Amsterdam later, where it states that Abraham Saporta is from London and he was a widow of Esther Saporta and that he married for the second time Rebecca de Medina Lobo. So we know that he was born in London. We know that he had a first wife who was called Esther Saporta. We don't really know if she was related or not, but she must have been. We know that he married Rebecca de Medina Lobo later in 1700, I think. And probably he was in Jamaica in 1688 because that's where his daughter was born. And this is important because actually Abraham Sasportas is the son of Jacob Sasportas, which means he bears the name Sasportas and he's uh, one that will propagate the name of and the descendants of Jacob Sasportas. So he had the first wife, a second wife. From his first wife, he had two daughters, and from his second wife, he had two sons. The first daughter being born in Jamaica, and this is in Curacao. Second being born in Amsterdam, and this is in Amsterdam. And the sons, both being born in Amsterdam, having made their life either in Amsterdam or in London. What's really interesting here is that we have a lot of material. Every box here that you can see here is a clickable box with direct access to online material. That ranges from prenuptial agreements to ketubot to burial places or burial material like tombs or burial registers, wills, uh, marriage notices. So we have a lot of material in Amsterdam, in Curacao as well. So it's really complete in terms of genealogical sources. From London, he escaped the plague and went to Hamburg. And in Hamburg, there are several things happening. First, we have noticed of tombs at the cemetery there of two Sasportases. There's Reina Sasportas and there's Aaron Sasportas. This is in 1669 and 1670 in Hamburg. We don't know exactly the relationship to Jacob Sasportas, but it has to be their children. And actually, it was most probably young children. And we can understand this from the tomb here of Aaron Sasportas that this is in Hamburg, where it's mentioned that he was basically a, a, a young man. In Hamburg, Jacob and Rachel Sasportas had a son Moshe, and this is an interesting one. He's later witness on two ketubot in London, is holder of passes to go from London to Amsterdam. He married inside the family with his niece, Rachel da Costa Mesquita, the daughter of his sister, probably in Tunis on his way to the Holy Land. And he's mentioned in his father's will on March 1698, but already dead by the time his brother wrote Genealogy. So we know he died quite soon after his father. But what's interesting is that we have other sources mentioning Moshe Sasportas, and namely, he was an emissary of the Sephardic congregations of Eretz Israel, what we call the Shadar, an emissary, a rabbinic emissary. And we can already have a clue about this because in his brother's will, it's mentioned that, so Samuel's will, he's mentioned that he's leaving legacy to the Holy Land, he's leaving money to the communities in Safed, in Tira Santa, which is Jerusalem, and to Hebron. And he's asking his brother Moshe to be the executor of the testament. So from this, we can already argue that Moshe was responsible for bringing the money, physically or not, from the Samuel's legacy to the Holy Land. And actually, shortly later, in Tammuz, in July 1696, we have actually a mention of the community in the Jewish community in Amsterdam saying that it is transferring money to Jerusalem by the hand of the emissary Moshe Sasportas. We also have another letter of recommendation from the community of Jerusalem, sending Moshe Sasportas to Europe, and namely to Benjamin Cohen of Reggio in Italia in 1700. And we're sure that we're talking about the same Moshe Sasportas because it's mentioned that he was the son of the Chacham Shalem Jacob Sasportas. While in Hamburg, Jacob and Rachel Sasportas had another daughter, Reina. This is also interesting. Reina married Chaim Toledano. They may have been cousins on their mother's side because, okay, I'm not going into too much details, but Rachel Sasportas, so Rachel Azule, so Jacob Sasportas' wife, was also related to the Toledanos from her sisters. She was a widow already in 1707, so still alive, but dead in 1730. What's interesting is that her children were in Saleh at that time, but his granddaughter is mentioned in a will in Tétouan by 1730. And I tried to dig, and I found that she was actually married to another Chaim Toledano in Gibraltar in May 1731. So she's mentioned she's receiving money from her grandmother in 1730 in Tétouan, and she's getting married in Gibraltar quite early, actually, in the early times of the Jewish community there in 1731. After Hamburg, Jacob Sasportas and family moved to Amsterdam, and in Amsterdam they had a daughter who's called Simha. Simha is also interesting because she married also another Sasportas, namely Rabbi Aaron Sasportas, who might be her twofold cousin because her uncle, how to say, because two brothers married two sisters, basically. Jacob and his brother Moshe married two sisters, so Aaron Sasportas may be her cousin on both his paternal and maternal sides. They left Amsterdam actually for Bordeaux. And this is very important because they left before 1719, and this was before the lettre patente, so before the Jews were officially allowed to be resident of Bordeaux in 1723. Up to 1723, only crypto Jews, new Christians or conversos were allowed there, but the official community started with the lettre patente allowing Jews to settle in Bordeaux in 1723. And Simha Sasportas and her husband, Rabbi Aaron Sasportas, were there even before that time. So again, Simha Jacob Sasportas married Aaron Sasportas. We have a lot of material about her offspring. Again, you see here the different documents that I had at my disposal. Some are offline, some are online. Maybe I can show this one here, which is a very beautiful ketubah. We have ketubot, we have prenuptial agreements, we have passes to go from Bordeaux to places in the Americas. So a lot of material that I hope to discuss in another talk. But what I wanted to stress here is that Simha married the Sasportas. So basically, the descendants of Jacob Sasportas, who bears the name Sasportas, also goes through a daughter. There was another daughter of Sasportas born in Amsterdam at that time. This is Esther. She was born in 1676, married Simpson da Costa Atias in Amsterdam. And actually, her will in 1730 contains a lot of material related to her siblings and to their surviving children. So most of the material that we know about the descendants, the second generation after Jacob Sasportas, come from the will of Esther Sasportas uh, in Amsterdam. From Amsterdam, the family moved to Livorno. In Livorno, we don't know much in terms of genealogy, but we know that Jacob and Rachel had a daughter. It's written here, Jacob and Rachel Sasportas, they had a daughter, and the daughter was called Buenaventura. So this must have been in 1679 in Livorno. We don't know anything about this Buenaventura. She may have died early there or in other place, but we have no information of her later life. From his short stay in Livorno, he got back to Amsterdam to act as the chief rabbi there. And in Amsterdam, he had a late daughter, Judith, who was not even married by the time Jacob Sasportas died in 1698. She married 1 year later, in 1699, to Moses Arias, and went to live in Dublin. So we know from the will of her sister that she was living in Dublin by 1730. Okay, these are all the children of Jacob Sasportas. So we've gone through his so his origins. We've gone through his marriages. We've gone through his children. I'm stopping here with this conclusion here. So this full tree summarizing the current state of the knowledge. Basically, Jacob Sasportas had a father, Aaron. He had a brother, Moshe. He had children from a first marriage, probably a first Aaron, then a Samuel that we know of, then daughters that remained in Tlemcen while Jacob made her life again made a new life in Europa. And there are children from his second wife, his second wife being Rachel Azulay, not Rachel Toledano. So all together he had at least 16 children, but from them only one son had children. This is Abraham. It turns out that also one of his daughters, Simha, had children she married a Sasportas, so her children are Sasportas as well. So basically, if we look only 2 generations afar, we have only a very scarce Sasportas descendants, only the children of Abraham and of Simha. I hope to discuss more in a later talk all the offspring of these guys, but from now on, the take-home message of my presentations are the following. First, the Sasportas belong both to the Atlantic and Mediterranean Sephardic diasporas, with Jacob children and grandchildren spread in many locations across Europe, across Africa, in Israel, and I mean Eretz Israel, of course, and in the Americas. I didn't mention, I mean, I mentioned it very quickly, but some of his grandchildren went to Curaçao, to the Martinique, and to Saint-Domingue. So basically, he had offspring everywhere. What's interesting is that despite being exiled from Sfarad, they did not convert to Christianity. So we saw that one of the ancestors converted very shortly to Christianity, just for the time being, for the time of ordering his stuff and matters of the community. But then he moved back. He moved to Tlemcen. But Jacob Sasportas never experienced Christianity. So he's one of the rare Western Sephardic authority with no Christian background. Sasportas claims to be the 11th generation since Nachmanides is not sustainable to my eyes. I prefer to read 17 generation instead of 11 in the original manuscript. Sasportas' second wife is not Rachel Toledano but Rachel Azoulay. And I want to say a word on the text. So let's try to be critical of the text, because in several occurrences along this study, I came across pieces of work where the printed text differed from the manuscript he was relying on actually much important matters. So I think it's quite important to go deep in the material and try to extract the most relevant information there. So with this, I stop. I had to hurry. Sorry, I didn't expect to take that much time. I have a lot of material in appendices if anyone is interested. I have open genealogical questions. I have directions for future research, but at this time, I'm happy to take questions and remarks from the audience.
Great, thank you very much. That was excellent. Can I ask, because you didn't say anything about the origin of the surname? I mean, obviously, if you just read it simply, say Sportas, six gates. But you discuss the tradition of the family being descended from Nachmanides, who came from Girona. And the Jewish quarter there, one of the gates of the Jewish quarter there was, I think, called Sobreportas. And I'm just wondering if you've got, I mean, that may be a bit romantic. I'm just wondering if you've
Yeah,
got any
yeah, I do.
ideas about the origin of the name.
I do. Actually, you mentioned Nachmanides, but Nachmanides himself is a Saporta.
Okay.
His real name, his Latin name is Bonastruc Saporta.
Okay.
Turns out it's not his offspring that went to the Sasportas branch, but he was a Saporta, and basically the name back in that time was Saporta. Then at some point it changed to Sasportes in Mallorca and later on in Bavaria. Um, for me, I mean it's a close. I mean this was discussed by Mathilde Tager. There's no relationship to Seis Portas or to any Portuguese meaning or to anything related to six. There's nothing related to six in this name. But, of course, later interpretations do. So even Jacob Sasportas had some poetic stances using six in his writings. So it's there's even a book by one of the Sasportas, one of the Rabbi Sasportas from Oran that went to Nice,
Yes.
who's called Shesharim, which literally means six gates. Of course, this is an allusion to his family names, but if we do the thing seriously, there's nothing related to six in this family name. It originates in Saporta, and this was shown by Mathilde Tager and by serious people, and everything else is a legend and poet. poetic
Yeah,
interpretations.
thank you. In the chat, Ali asked what happened to his first wife, the one who was ransomed.
We don't know. Neither the first wife nor the other children. We know that daughters survived because we know that daughters were still alive in 1692, I think, by the time Samuel wrote his will. So we know that daughters in Tlemcen survived. We don't know of any boy that survived, and we don't know of the wife. What happened to the wife? Probably they remained in, two possibilities. Either the funds sent by the community in Amsterdam reached the king of Tlemcen and maybe they were released. But if that's the case, why Sasportas didn't go with them again? Why did he had to take another wife later on? So probably they were not released. Either they died or they were kept captive for most of the time then.
And not really a genealogical question, but do you have any idea why he was so strongly opposed to Shabbatai Tzvi?
I did not investigate this myself. Uh, I think he relied on a serious interpretation of um, so basically an opponent of mysticism in a way in broad terms, but also in a really precise description of what should be a Messiah and what should be the prophet of the Messiah and what should not be. And I think, but I'm not sure, I'm not an expert at all, that he was claiming that neither Sabtai himself had the proof of being a Messiah, nor Nathan de Gaza, his prophet, exhibited the behavior or whatever proofs of being the prophet of the Messiah. This is what I understand, but I was never really interested in this. I think probably the book by Jacob Dweck must have some answers to this.
Okay, thank you. Ton.
Uh, Thank you, Rémy, for this presentation. It clears up a lot of things and it leaves a lot of other things in the dark. But one remark, according to me, at least I remember that Jacob had another son, Aaron, in Amsterdam. And that one died at a very young age in the 1680s. So
I don't.
he had three sons called Aaron.
I think I had this one at some point in my research, but I dropped it. Uh, isn't this the one that's called Von Yosef? I'm
Uh,
not sure. I'm not sure it's a correct connection to Rabbi Jacob Sasportas. We can
ah,
discuss,
mm,
but I don't believe he's a son of Jacob Sasportas.
okay,
But we should discuss this.
I'll look it up again. Um, so I found it really remarkable that a family line that's mostly from Morocco and Algiers ends up all over the world. Uh,
Yeah.
why was there this movement to all parts of the earth? Did they not like their father or something like that?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think maybe to the opposite, maybe he sent them. I believe that at least for Bordeaux, he may have sent his daughter and his son-in-law to
Mhm.
Bordeaux to act as the first, one of the first Hahams there in the Jewish community, in the newly found Jewish community in Bordeaux. It may have been the same in Dublin, we don't know. It has been the same in Curaçao, where her daughter married Raphael Yeshurun, who became the leading rabbi in Curaçao. So I wouldn't dig in. I mean, I wouldn't argue in antagonism between the father and the children. But I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. I think the two most interesting children of Jacob are Isaac and Abraham because they sort of took care of their father's legacy.
Yeah,
Isaac wrote an elegy, and Abraham more or less um, um, well collected his text in a book.
yeah. He put
Uh,
it in print in
yeah,
Amsterdam.
and the book seems no longer to be around, at least the original, but some of it survives in copies, and of course this is all in Hebrew. Uh, is there some way to have access to them? So maybe some obscure points in the genealogy can be further.
No, there is a manuscript. There's I mentioned this. There is I mean the one that I used to find to discuss.
There was the
This one, this
elegy
Yeshiva
of.
University manuscript here.
Okay.
Do I have the link? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's coming. It's here.
So I think there's a lot more to discover.
But this is known actually. This was put in print. So except for tiny mistakes like the one I discussed, most of the content is known.
Okay. And you have a digital copy of that?
Is there? I mean, you're talking about the manuscript
Yes.
or the edited,
Or the
the
print
printed,
version?
the print version? Yes, yes. It's available in Hebrew books,
Okay. Thank you.
and it's even. I think it was even. Was it translated? Maybe. I think it was translated.
That would be even better. Um, Bruce Kahan has his hands up.
Yeah, really, Remy. Thank you for the detail here and the embedded links. Two questions. First, is this posted online, your presentation, so we can click on the links? Are you going to post it?
Yeah, I would be happy to share it. I'm not sure you have a place to put it, Ton, but otherwise I can just send it by email or by
Yeah, you
Dropbox.
sent
Send
it
the Dropbox link.
To David or me, then
It's
we
quite
can
heavy
share.
though, so it will not fit in an email. We can arrange. I
Okay.
can
Yeah,
share the
I
link.
think if you put it to a PDF with the links active, it should print. The second, the more kind of curious question I had, and probably David and Tan, and you know all this. I don't. Why in the world were people ransoming rabbis' children? Where were the rabbis supposed to come up? And yes, I get that they could turn to the Amsterdam community and get money, but was that a normal activity to ransom the family members of rabbis in the Sephardic world? Did that happen often?
From what I know, it's not. I don't think it's related to him being a rabbi. I think it's related to him being a Sasportas because there's something I did not discuss is that there were Sasportas in Tlemcen and there were Sasportas in Oran, and in Oran they were under Spanish rule. In Tlemcen, they were under Turkish or Arab rule, and actually they played a double game. You know, they exchange information from one place to the other place. They change, they were sending money from one place to the other. They were sending intelligence from one place to the other. And there's a known, there are known antecedents. So I actually have a slide background. There's a background. I mean, there's a background of the relationships between the Sasportas and the kings of Tlemcen in the 17th century, even the 16th, already in the 16th and 17th century. And because we know from the book of Jean-Frédéric Schaub that the relationships were not that good. Already other Sasportas were put in jail, other Sasportas were tortured, and other Sasportas were put to death by the king of Tlemcen. And this is all because they were sharing intelligence with the Spanish through the Sasportas branch in Oran. And basically, the whole family was playing a double game in Sasportas and Tlemcen. And they suffered from this in Tlemcen, and they suffered from this in Oran because eventually they got exiled from Oran in 1669. So there's a background. It's not that he was ransomed from nowhere. Of course, he was a rabbi. Maybe he was not involved in intelligence. Maybe he was not involved in other, in other respect. But somehow there's a background of bad relationships between the Sasportas and the kings in Tlemcen around that time.
Thanks, Rémy. That makes it intriguing and worth a Hollywood movie. Good.
Actually, if I can just add something, in London, we still have a Parnas de Cautivos, whose responsibility is to ransom people held hostage by the Barbary pirates.
Nowadays?
Well, I mean, not still functioning, but we still have the honorific post. I sometimes on Kal Nidre get to carry the Torah scroll because the Parnas is currently a lady.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would think that the pirates are mostly in the city of London these days, David.
Well, they're kind of back in business, I think, in North Africa. But anyway. Does anybody have any more questions?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question.
Great.
So you keep pronouncing the name Sasportas, S-A-S, but here in the U.S., I've never come across it spelled that way. It's always Saportas, S-A-P-O-R-T-A-S. And even when you look at the passenger manifest, it's still spelled that way. Question number one, is it the same family, which I suspect it is? And question number two, maybe that Sas and Sa has to do with local pronunciation rather than meaning six.
Thank you. I think I addressed this question by David already. Indeed, Sas and Sa, I mean, there's no relationship to six at some point, but still, it's not the same families. The one that you're talking about in the United States are straight from Turkey, from the Ottoman Empire. They came there straight from Barcelona, but in later stages. They didn't. I mean, it's not the same family that went from Mallorca to Barbaria and from Barbaria to Europe and to the Americas. It's a family that originated in Catalonia and went straight to, I think, Izmir or Edirne in Turkey. The rabbi, I mean, the head of the family here is Hanor Saporta. He was a rabbi from Catalonia who moved to I think Andrinople or Izmir in the 14th century.
Mhm. But the spelling in Amsterdam is mostly Saportas. And I suppose it doesn't matter much, Sasportas or Saportas.
Not really. I mean, if you look even at the picture, I think it's Sasportas that's written here. I mean, I need to maybe make it a bit larger, but
Yeah, I think from the etymological point of
oh no,
view,
you're right.
the
Here it's
names are the
Sasportas.
same. Yeah, what I'm trying to point out is I think they're the same name etymologically speaking, from the root of the name, not whether the families here in the US are related to the families you're researching. That wasn't my point. I was talking about the meaning of the name, and they're likely connected
No,
with
I
or
mean,
without this.
I mean, like connected. I mean, all the people that I'm talking about in my presentation, all the people that originate from Abraham Sasportas that moved from Mallorca to Tlemcen, they write their name in Hebrew with Shin Shin. They start the name always start with Shin Shin.
Okay,
The
you
one
understand
the
you
one
understand that names take on variations, right? And I'm not talking about
no,
whether the
precisely not. Precisely not. I'm saying in Hebrew there's no variation.
no, maybe not in Hebrew, just the way my Goldgleet original name had no variations in Russian, but when it was transcribed to other languages, it took on variations.
Ah,
That's my
of course. Of
and
course. In French, I mean, in any language, of course, yes. I mean,
so
starting from mine, Chicheportiche, this looks very different from Sasportas, but in Hebrew, it's the same.
yeah, but regardless of whether it's the same, my question was, and I still maintain it's likely that Saportas and Sasportas, regardless of how many S's are in there, are from from the relationship of how names evolve. They're the same name. The same way Sarfati is Sarfatty, Sarfaty, Tsar, and so on. They are all the same name. And even though they may be written in the same letters in Hebrew, by the time they came to English or Turkish or whatever, the spelling changed. It evolved. And I can't find the right word to say that genealogically speaking, we have to be more open to different spellings.
Yes, we do, of course. I mean, I mean, there are obvious proofs, even in the material that I show. Sometimes it's written Sasportas, sometimes it's written Saportas, sometimes it's written Saporta, sometimes it's written Zaporta with a Z, with a Z. Sometimes it's
Or
written
C.
with a C. Sometimes, of course. I mean, I mean, but for me, this is not. This is irrelevant to me. I mean, what matters is how it's written in Hebrew. I mean, to decide if it's the same people, if it's the same name, if it's whatever. Because of course, every language may pronounce it in different ways. Maybe some languages don't even have some sounds. So of course, I mean, in vernacular languages, the name can take very different forms, and actually much more different than just Saporta and Sasportas. Again, like I said, Chicheportiche is the same, and Sportuche is the same. And, there are, you would find very different ways of writing or pronouncing the name, which is the same in Hebrew.
Okay. Bernard Miller has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry to do this, but I'm going to carry on with the same point. But first of all, can I congratulate you on the brilliant work that you've done in making this presentation linked and clickable. Being able to access documents from links in something like this is really valuable and is a great example. So I'm looking forward to being able to click through and try to find things. I wanted to go back to the name and ask, when did the Hebrew with Shin Shin first appear? Do you know that?
If the first mention that I am aware of are from the guy that I'm starting the genealogy with, Abraham Sasportas. We have him here. So this guy here who moved from Mallorca to Tlemcen.
Okay,
We can
because
find here, like let's take for example the question he sends to the Ribash, and you see it, Sasportas.
yeah, thank you.
But
Okay.
again, I'm reading Sasportas, but we don't have to read Sasportas. We can read Sasportes, we can read Chicheportiche, we can read whatever we want. But
You
it's
can. The reason that I'm asking is because when you showed the page with the Mallorquin on, which is basically Catalan,
yeah.
and you had variants that were Sasportas in pronunciation, which are spelt in Catalan Sesportes, which is the Catalan for 6 doors. And the reason it struck me while I was watching it was an old friend of mine married in a restaurant in Barcelona called Set Portas. which is 7 doors. And there is a family. I don't think they are in any way related to any of this, and I don't think that they are Sephardic. But there is a family that has that name because it was mentioned at the wedding reception. And so when I saw that, I thought, that's interesting. Oh, you've got it there, 1383. You've got May in Catalan, you've got Abraham Sasportas 4, and that is pronounced Sasportas, but it is written with 2 E's, and it could equally be Sin Sin rather than Shin Shin.
Yes.
And so it could have been
Yeah.
a Hebrewisation of
Yes,
the Catalan, which
it is.
then became the name that stuck.
Yeah, sure. That's the most probable. I mean, this is very possible, and this is the most probable interpretation. I don't want to enter this consideration by
Okay.
starting at
Sorry.
Abraham Sasportas, where I know things, because farther away I don't know. So that's why I'm not going there. But from there, and I wrote already in an article about this, but some way, at some point, it went from Saporta to
Yeah.
Sasportas, and at the same time, it moved from Sin to Shin. So somehow there was a knowledge that I want to make it look more Jewish. I want to make it more related to six. Why? I don't know. This remains to be understood. But the Shin is not the natural transcription for the S for Sa.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever you translate something from French, Spanish, whatever, to Hebrew, you don't
Yeah.
use Shin, you use Sin. So if it were translated from Spanish, or from Catalan, or from any Latin language, it should have been with Sin.
Okay, thanks.
The fact that it's shins, it means something, and it means that someone at some point thought about this and made it look more Jewish, made it look more related to shesh in Hebrew, because actually it's closer to shesh, which is 6 in Hebrew, than to sas, which is 6 in Spanish. It's really hard to trace the sas in all of this in Spanish, or in Catalan, whatever. But it's really easy to trace it to shesh in Hebrew, which is 6. And somehow it doesn't make sense because it would be shesh portas. So it's like a mix. Somehow had
Yes.
someone at some point had a poetic stance to put a shesh inside this name. At this stage, I don't know why and when and who.
Did you say that Nachmanides was a Saporta?
He was.
Okay, and do we know where that came from?
Girona. I mean, we
Okay.
know of Saporta in Girona, in Barcelona, in all of mainland Catalonia.
Okay, thank you.
I have here early mentions. We have Ketubot. We have Ketubot from different places. I don't remember exactly well. From Barcelona, from I think even from Mallorca.
Yeah, the third one, the Alcaide de Ciutat de Mallorca,
Yeah.
is probably the one that would have that. But thank you. I think this is going to go on for some time, but it's very
It
valuable.
never ended.
Yeah.
But I mean, Mathilde Tager did a really important work in this matter on the onomastic side.
Can I just ask you, and it's not directly related, but it is to do with Nachmanides and Maimonides. Do we know why there were Greek patronymics, the ides ending, on so many of the names in was it the 12th and 13th century, where they didn't appear to have any connection with Greece?
I don't.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Doesn't it just mean son of?
Yeah, but it's Greek rather than Latin, Italian, Hebrew, Spanish.
Most probably because it was named like this by Christian clerks.
Ah,
Because
okay.
in the Jewish literature, it's never mentioned like this. It's Ramban and Rambam.
Sure.
It's Ben Nachman or Ben Moshe, but
Yeah, no, I just wondered why so many of them ended up with an apparently Greek patronymic in non-Hebrew, where they didn't appear to have Greek connections. So I wondered whether anybody knows that. I'm sure that there is something. I'll have to do some researching.
I think so. I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you to our patrons who are with us here today. We will make all of these meetings possible. And a special thank you to Rémy Chicheportiche for his lively speech and many revelations. And we hope to see him again on the Family Sasportas on the sequel. Thank you.
thank you,
And
Tan, and thank you
yeah.
all in the audience for the questions.
And we hope to see you all again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.